All right, we are live. I'm Matt Lewis here for another Substack live conversation. This time with Cillizza. How you doing, man?
Hello, friend.
Right before we started recording, I got an email from you from your Substack.
Yes, indeed.
And I didn't have a chance to read it, but it was an interesting question. It was, why is Kamala Harris's book selling so well?
Yeah.
This is an interesting question because it's selling really well.
Yes.
I don't think it's helping her in terms of her reputation, her image, but in terms of selling books, moving product, something about the way that they've either written it or rolled it out has worked. What is your take on that?
Yeah. So that's exactly the question I try to answer, because I say in that piece, I say, like, look, no offense to Kamala Harris, but, like, I did not think that this book would sell 350,000 copies in the first week. For people who are unfamiliar with the book industry, I mean, that is a vast sum. The books Chris and Cillizza have written didn't sell 3,500 copies in the first week.
And if you did, there are times during the year when you could make the bestseller list by selling fewer than 5,000.
People do not buy a ton of books. Is the dirty little secret of the publishing industry. So anyway, I mean, 350,000 is a massive number. It's going to be number one on the Nonfiction Times bestseller list. They're saying it's going to be the best-selling memoir of the year. I did not see that coming. But I think you make the right point, Matt, and this is the question I tried to answer is, okay, like, why? You know what I mean? Because, like, if people loved Kamala Harris so much, she'd probably be president, right? Like, she lost. And so I think your two options, I think, basically to answer the why question are, she's more popular and people are more interested in her than people like me. I won't lump you into this, but then people like me thought. Or, and I think the second one is the more obvious and right answer, there still remains huge amounts of interest in what the hell was going on with Joe Biden. You know, like, was he really, like, falling off? And did she see it? And you know, what does she think about the fact that he's kind of run her down post-election and all? Like, I always default to the American public consumes drama. Like, we like fights, you know? I always remind people, every time I speak to a group, I'm like, raise your hand if you've heard of Rob Portman, former Ohio Republican senator. And of course, like, unless you're from Ohio, nobody raises their hand, right? Like, and then I'm like, raise your hand if you've heard of Marjorie Taylor Greene. And, you know, I mean, 95% of people raise their hand even if they're not in politics, which I think proves the point, which is, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is 1/1 billionth of the legislator Rob Portman was when he was in Congress. Rob Portman was in, you know, the Bush administration, then a senator from Ohio, a member of Congress, a member of the leadership in the House. But nobody knows who the hell he is because he was just like a guy who tried to do his job. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a attention hog. And so we love conflict, we love drama. And I think the early excerpts, you mentioned sort of how they sold the book. The early excerpts, particularly the one in the Atlantic, where she writes about how it was recklessness, her word, that Biden wound up being the nominee, and that you know, it was ego and ambition that drove him. And then there, you know, some of the stuff about, like, her handicapping her VP picks and saying Josh Shapiro wanted it too much, and I should have picked Pete Buttigieg, but he was a gay man, and I thought that was too much. Like, it generates, people are like, oh, going to be honest in the book. So I think there's some of that. I think the Harris people may misread it a little bit and say, like, people love her. I'm not sure it's that. I think it's more the kind of the fact that the early excerpt suggested she was going to be more candid than a politician typically is about a situation, particularly with Biden, that I think people are still very interested in. That's I don't know what you think, but that's my conclusion.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. There's a new it's been out about a year, but I started watching this podcast. It's called something like Sports Gossip is actually the title. And
I do love that.
You know, it's two young ladies.
And they talk down so that I remember to listen to it.
And they don't get into, like, the details of, like, you know, the offensive line or something.
Right.
But they talk
They're
about,
not, like, watching the all-22 on formations. That's
exactly. But they talk about, like, Bill Belichick and his girlfriend and stuff like that. I mean, all this drama. And I mean, honestly, like, I remember just years ago listening to Tony Kornheiser back when I go through any litany of the horrific coaches that the Redskins had 10 or 15 years ago. And, but just I think part of it wasn't just the sports. It was the drama and the gossip.
Totally.
And I'm not saying that makes us look great, but I think it speaks to something to do with human nature, perhaps.
I still remember this. And there was I was at CNN at the time, and this was in the mid 2020s. And they announced to much fanfare that they were going to have a climate team. They were going to do 5 people who were going to focus on climate. Bill Weir, who used to be at ABC, was kind of the on TV face of it, but they also had person who was going to write about it for the web, and Bill went and he did this very beautiful, the glaciers in the background and they're melting and this big presentation, and they had a really nice display online. And either that same day or the day after, or the day before, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm sure you remember this, she posted on Twitter at the time, "This is my COVID vaccine," because we were in the heart of COVID. And it was her doing her workout, with the pull-ups and pushing the tire over. And I remember I wrote that up, and it took 15 minutes, and that got 2.5 million page views, and all the climate stuff, which cost much more money, which got which inarguably was more important. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of there's a gap between who we want to be and who our consumption habits say we are.
Yes.
That I think the Harris book is a good example of. It's it. I think it's we say we want these detailed policy proposals, but really what we want is a little bit of drama.
Yeah. And if we talk about journalism becoming too gossipy or insipid, or not insipid, but you know what I mean, just vapid, then we are to blame as the consumer. I'll lump myself.
Yes, we are all. I mean, I find it in my own life, man. It's I will consume Bill Belichick, Jordan Hudson content.
Yes.
Whereas I'm less likely, and I'm a big sports fan, but I'm much less likely to be all right, well, how many throws down the sidelines to the second level is Drake May making? Do you know what I mean? I just don't.
Totally. Yeah.
By the way, who really understands that reality of the gap between who we want to be and who we are? Donald John Trump. I mean, he is a classic example of providing and acting in the way that we kind of are, as opposed to the way that we would like to be. Typically, we have elected presidents. It's our better angels. Do you know what I mean? The best of us. He doesn't even attempt to be that, right? I mean, he is kind of I'm going to say all the shit that you think, but never say. I'm going to be that guy. And as a result, people are he's authentic. I always think it's funny, the guy who has literally lied more than any public figure in history is regarded as authentic. But I think it's because of the he admits what he is. They're all like this, but he admits he's like this.
He's an honest liar. That's what Dave Chappelle said, and I think you nailed it with that.
And by the way, I think you and I have had this conversation. I keep meaning to read it. The Chappelle thing made me think of it. And the Jimmy Kimmel back and forth is I probably should have done it then. But I really do think comedians, if you are looking for people who understand and analyze Trump in a really meaningful, correct way, comedians, I think, are where you need to look. They understand him, because I think there's so many similarities between what makes good comedy and how Donald Trump approaches content, the presidency. I really think they have insight into how he views the world, why he's popular. Why I keep meaning to write that, and I don't do it. And
totally.
That made me think of it, because Chappelle is a great example of someone who I think really understands how Trump appeals to people.
He nailed it in that SNL monologue years ago. And I would say it's not a coincidence that if you look at, I mean, arguably the most powerful political commentators in America today are Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn.
Yep.
And arguably the most effective resistance to Donald Trump has come from Jimmy Kimmel.
Yep.
In terms of pushing back rhetorically. And
Yep.
or
Jon
people
Stewart, or like these are,
yeah.
It's not like, and God love him, but it's not like Jake Tapper. It's like Jon Stewart, right? Like it's people who are, or South Park. I mean, it's another great example. I mean, it's another great example of like comedians. I mean, I don't think either of the South Park guys would say that they are political analysts, but I think that their ability to understand him and the climate he has created, I think, are really, really important. And in this moment. Anyway, I know that's not what we're talking about, but
we could,
the Chappelle thing made me think of it.
We could definitely spend the next hour talking about it, but I guess we shouldn't. Because if you're watching, and we do have a distinguished audience here, I saw David Pietrusia, the noted and famed historian and author, is joining us, among other dignitaries. So thank you, everyone, for watching. We will. I promise we will turn to the shutdown before I get you out of here. But Chris, I did want to go a little bit counter programming and talk. You have a list. This is something you do periodically where you will rank who's winning the Republican campaign for 2028, who's winning the Democratic campaign. And you just recently reevaluated the Republicans. Now, we've had this conversation before, and I know people, this is sort of privileged information. Your subscribers get the full list. So I won't ask you to give me the whole list, but here's my question. Who has made a move since the last time you and I talked? Who's up? And is anyone jumped up or jumped down?
I think down. The point that I make in that piece, let me first say, and I hope this is apparent to people, it's October 2nd, 2025. So making a list of who is going to be the Republican or Democratic nominee in 2028, while I find it fascinating and I think people are interested in it, you must take it with a grain of salt.
But by the way, I mean, like, who's up and who's down? Could there be any more gossip than that?
Love it, man.
You know who I like? You know who I think's really doing well right now? I think Ted Cruz is that. It's like that sort of thing. Like
lists are, it's why every music publication does the 10 best albums of fill in the blank. Because guess what? You probably don't agree with their best 10 albums, but you will fight to the death for your picks, and that's engagement, and that works. Okay, so let me just say broadly, it's October 2025. Okay, I do not have a crystal ball.
Wildly premature.
Yes, it's very early. My whole point is, if it was today, this is how I think it would sort out, with the acknowledgement it's not today, right? Like, I get that. I think it's the broad point I made in the piece, Matt, was like, I think it's so fascinating, the difference between the Democratic nomination fight for 2020 and the Republican nomination fight for 2020. So the Democratic nomination fight, Democrats are desperate to move on from 2024, from Donald Trump's presidency. Like, they're all in for all talk of who might be the next person to run for president. Like, they can't get enough of it. They can't hit the fast forward button too soon. You got people going to Iowa and New Hampshire, that Gavin Newsom. Republican race is the exact opposite, right? And there's one reason for it, which is Trump. I mean, the fact that Trump, I'll note, on Monday, right, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Mike Johnson, and John Thune are in the Oval Office. Donald Trump has very carefully positioned for the cameras 2 Trump 2028 MAGA hats. If you miss them, he made sure to tweet out, or not tweet, whatever, Truth Social out the picture to his followers. The 2028 Trump thing, just an elaborate troll of Democrats and the media. I think he would love to be president again. I don't know that he can. I mean, I think constitutionally he probably can't, but I could see him starting to run again. So there's that, right? It's kind of hard to be like starting to run for president when the guy who's in office, who has a stranglehold on the party, is kind of toying with still running. Then, even if Trump isn't running, he is not a guy who likes other people taking attention away from him. He kind of wants you to pay attention to the very end. So it's like the biggest thing that you can do in the Republican primary is not piss Donald Trump off, right? So I think I think as a result, what you've seen is a very slow starting 2028 race, a very under the radar 2028 race. And I think when you ask about biggest movers, to me, they're most of them aren't doing a hell of a lot for those reasons. I think the people who moved up and down, the last time I did it was July, so a couple months ago. The people who moved up and down it was more about me kind of probably, and I write about this, probably just misassessing or reassessing kind of where they are. I will be honest, and I'm happy to share this because I don't think it's any great revelation. I think there are two and a half people who really matter in this race, and then everyone else. JD Vance is one of those people. Donald Trump Jr. is another one of those people. And then the half is Marco Rubio, because I can't decide whether he actually matters or he doesn't, so we'll give him a half.
Right.
Beyond that, it's hard for me to imagine anyone else, at least right now, being the nominee. Like, I moved Ted Cruz way up, for example.
Yes.
Like, I think I had him at like 8, and now he's at 4 or 5. And the reason for that was like, I think Ted Cruz is like a very able politician. And I know in the write-up, yes, he did go to Cancun during a massive problem with the Texas grid. That was idiotic. That is not good evidence. But I'm just saying, like, this is a guy who I would not have bet in 2014 that Ted Cruz would be the establishment pick in the 2016 race to be the nominee. Now, I didn't foresee Donald Trump either, but Ted Cruz somehow weaseled his way into that. Then Cruz goes to the convention that year, and he badmouths Trump and refuses to endorse him. And I was like, well, that's it for Ted Cruz. But then Cruz has somehow kind of, again, weaseled his way back into Trump's good graces. Like, I think he is more able as a politician than certainly the left wants to give him credit for. So, I think I had kind of Cruz a little bit.
And he's managed to distance himself from Donald Trump in recent weeks on a couple of topics, including free speech, without pissing off Trump.
Right, on Brendan Carr and the FCC.
Yeah. And he's a podcaster too, which in this day and age
is huge.
Is important. So I think we've been underrating Cruz. I mean, again, I still don't think he's in the top here, those 2.5 men, but I think I've been probably underrating him.
Yeah, and I think he's easy to dunk on. You know what I mean? Like, he's kind of a goofball and awkward, and like I will admit I still every once in a while watch the GIF of him. I think it was when he dropped out of the race where he accidentally elbows his wife in the face as he's hugging the guy behind him. Like, yeah, I mean, I get all those things. Like, but I think there's a little bit more to him. And the other one that I moved up a little bit was DeSantis. And again, talk about easily mockable. I think there are two ways to read what happened in 2024 with Ron DeSantis. And I think that impacts how you think about him now. Way one is the race was never really winnable for anyone other than Trump, particularly after the 4 indictment. That's way one read it. Way two is Trump could have been beaten. DeSantis is an idiot. He's a terrible candidate, and he didn't take advantage of it. Okay, so that's way two. Way one suggests to me, okay, like DeSantis is going to have a really good conservative story to tell after 8 years as the governor of Florida. And Trump was unbeatable, and this race was 2024 was far less about about DeSantis than it was about Trump. Way two is, this guy's just not a good candidate. Like, he's never going to be a good candidate. Yes, he's got things to run on, but he had things to run on 4 years ago, and he kind of sucked. So, like, I think I had ascribed too much to Camp 2, when I think Camp 1 may be true. And again, I do think, like, look, to me, if you're not talking about JD Vance or Donald Trump Jr. or maybe Marco Rubio, you're probably not talking about someone who's going to be the nominee. But, so I moved DeSantis up. I moved Cruz up. The only other one that I don't see popping up on a lot of other people's lists, and yes, I am not the only crazy person to do these lists, I always put Sarah Sanders in there because I do think she's pretty talented. She's got a good story to tell, right? She's going to be reelected to a second term overwhelmingly from Arkansas. And I think there's got to be a woman somewhere in the mix. And like, I don't think it's going to be Kristi Noem. Marsha Blackburn is running for governor of Tennessee this year. She'll probably win, but like, is she too old to do it? I mean, I guess there is no too old because our past two presidents have been 81 and 79. But like, I don't know. I just think she's capable and she's got good Trump credentials to the extent the social conservative movement exists anymore. She because through her father is very known in that community. I don't know. I always put her in there because I think she's intriguing. Maybe as a VP, maybe it's ultimately a VP thing, but I always put her in there, and I don't see a lot of people. There's got to be a woman who looks at this field and like, man, this is a lot of dudes. Maybe I should get it.
Yeah.
I think
Well, like Nikki Haley was
exactly
able to carve out that, that niche. Shout out to, I think, is it Talmadge, if I'm mispronouncing it, who is a subscriber who just joined us on the Substack Live, who is a supporter on Substack. So thank you very much for that. That is greatly appreciated.
Support journalism. I always say, like, you don't have to support me, you don't have to support Matt, but if you don't support some people doing the kind of journalism that isn't tied to big corporate media and isn't predictably partisan, it will not exist. And any country that doesn't have independent journalism has not done well in the long run. So again, not support us, although that would be nice. You don't have to support us. You got to support some people. You got it. It's just like you want an accountant to do your taxes, you pay that person to do your taxes. You want a journalist to tell you what in the hell is happening in the world and sift through all this craziness, you got to pay those people.
Here's what they want. We're going to pay them now. Because after all this foreplay, all this throat clearing, we got to talk about the shutdown, right? And there are a lot of ways that we could go with this, but I want to ask you, because the Washington Post, Chris, is out with a survey.
I saw this.
And talk about being wildly premature. But as of now, it appears, a little bit to my surprise, actually, that that folks are more likely to blame Donald Trump and Republicans for the shutdown, which, okay, historically, you could argue Republicans usually get blamed, right? Because, they're the anti-government party. And a lot of times they've been the ones who were actually, like in 2013, for example, the aforementioned Ted Cruz.
The wall. Funding for the wall.
But it was also about Obamacare, right? He wanted to...
2013 was Obamacare, 2019 was the wall. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So a lot of times Republicans have, but this time around, the dynamic's a little different. Are you surprised by this poll? And do you think it matters?
No, on the second question, does it matter? Am I surprised? A little bit. I mean, look, I guess I think I overthink things a lot in my professional and my private life. And I think that we might be overthinking this. Look, here's, to the extent people pay any attention to politics, they probably know one thing about Washington. Republicans are in charge, right? Like, Donald Trump is the president, unless you're living on another planet. I don't know if you know who controls the House and Senate, but I think you have a general sense that Republicans are in charge. So given that, when the government shuts down, I think it's a reasonable thing to be like, well, these people you're the boss and the government shut down, so it's your fault. Again, it's more complicated than that. It always is. But I guess that makes some level of sense. I don't think it matters. I think we get particularly in Washington, we get very wrapped around the axle about these government shutdowns, the possibility of it when it happens. Again, this is the first one since 2018, 2019. So, first one in 6 or 7 years. But I don't think politically it matters all that much. If I'm Abigail Spanberger in the Virginia governor's race and I got to face voters in a month and Northern Virginia is wildly populated with people who are federal employees, I'm not sure I'm like, oh, this is terrible. But I'm also thinking, well, if nothing happens, I'm probably going to win. And so this throws a little bit of a wrench into it. It's like, I don't know if this is... Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're onto something. I'm actually writing a piece for The Hill right now. And I started looking into this a little. It's not just about Virginia, but I'm looking at some maybe unforeseen or underrated externalities that could come from the shutdown. Virginia is one of them. But here's the interesting thing. So Virginia always has these off-year elections. And so the historical pattern
after the presidential.
And the historical pattern for the last 50 years is whichever party wins the presidency, the other party wins the governorship in Virginia. But there's one exception in recent years. 2013 when Terry McAuliffe won. Now, why is that interesting? It was right after Ted Cruz caused the government shutdown. So the only time that history has been defied was based on a party getting blamed for the government shutdown.
Yeah, and I do think that that's a possibility because the election is in a month, as opposed to,
And people are voting now.
And people are
early
voting has started, as opposed to the midterm elections, which are in 13 months. And the fact that if you live anywhere in the DMV, including Northern Virginia, you know a million people who are federal employees who are furloughed right now. And who, Trump said this morning he's going to meet with Russ Vought to talk about the head of the OMB, to talk about permanently getting rid of some of these federal organizations, right? So, yes, it's probably temporary, but it's not definitely temporary. And I think that nervousness, that uncertainty, kind of vivifying the ghosts of Doge, all that stuff could actually matter in an election where people are voting now. I tend to think drawing these conclusions oh, well, Republicans are getting blamed more right now for the shutdown. So in 15 days when the government reopens, and I would guess Democrats don't get any hard and fast promises of Obamacare subsidy extensions or whatever, that means that this is going to be a good year. 2026 will be a good year. Yeah, I mean, I think people's attention span is not that high. I think we tend to, because many of us live here and so many of us know federal employees, we tend to overrate the political impacts of government shutdowns.
Going back to 2013, it's a prime example. The shutdown impacted the Virginia gubernatorial race in 2013, but the next year, Republicans, won the midterms. And so it had no effect. A year later, it had no effect, but it did impact. So Spanberger is up by double digits right now. I think Winsome Sears, the gubernatorial Republican candidate, not a good candidate. So I think it would take a lot. This shutdown would have to be Democrats would have to be really blamed, in a very clear way for this to change that. But what about, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but down ballot, the Attorney General, Jason Miyares,
Lieutenant Governor.
Do they squeak it out because of the shutdown or something?
So typically, and this isn't always the case, but typically, whoever's party wins at the top of the ticket in Virginia tends to win the other statewide races that are on the ballot, because the truth is, people barely know who the governor is, much less who the attorney general, the lieutenant governor is. So I tend to think, look, if Abigail Spanberger is going to win by 9 points over Winsome Earl Sears, then Jay Johnson is getting elected attorney general, and the lieutenant governor nominee for Democrats is going to win. It's very unlikely those races separate out.
You have to go back to around 2005 or something to find Jerry Kilgore somehow wins attorney general when a Democrat. Yeah, but it could happen. But it's unlikely.
I think, to your point, the races would have to be close for the shutdown to matter. Right now, there isn't a lot of polling on the AG or the LG race, but right now, the governor's race in Virginia, I mean, the New Jersey governor's race seems at least potentially closer than the Virginia race. I don't hear anything from Republicans about the Virginia race. I mean, it's just Winsome Earl Sears did not raise the money. Spanberger's been on TV. Spanberger is from the right part of the state, sort of, between Richmond and DC, but not from Northern Virginia. Former CIA, right? Good background for the state. She has a moderate voting record when she was in Congress, although Republicans won't say she's not a moderate. I don't think it's going to be close enough for the shutdown, which does provide a sort of a unpredictable variable. I don't see it impacting.
Yeah. I'm resisting the urge to start talking about Ken Cuccinelli almost winning that race. How we could all be surprised, but I won't go there because it's going to lose. This is the opposite of fan service.
Let's go deep into the Virginia governor's race history.
The opposite of pandering to our audience here. So let me ask you.
Lyles was elected governor.
Let me ask you about this. because I'm working on a different piece, yet another piece for the LA Times. And I'm making the case that, and I don't think this will surprise you, Chris, but I would like to get your take on it, that
Sure.
that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are not wartime consigliere.
Yes,
That
Tom.
if the Democrats' hope is that they can out-message Trump, they have picked the wrong horses. And I know this is also the opposite of fan service at this point. But I just got to be honest about it. I mean, this is like, regardless of who's right or wrong on the merits of the shutdown, and I totally understand why Democrats feel like they need to draw a line in the sand somewhere. I just, it's, I don't know what the analogy is. I said chess and checkers, and that's not right because Donald Trump's not playing chess. But maybe there's a sports analogy that Trump is something versus Schumer and Jeffries.
I just think Trump is good. I always use a military analogy because I love the Civil War and not love the Civil War. I love history of the Civil War. I'm not pro Civil War, but like the thing that great generals on either side in the Civil War, the reason that they were great generals ultimately was, and this is true throughout history, I just know about the Civil War, they were good at picking the place and time and location when to engage, and they knew when not to engage, right? And it's the classic, like, you got to fight when you have the high ground. Literally, you're on the top and you're firing down.
Sun Tzu, art of war stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that Trump is, in his own weird way, and I do not think he is playing four-dimensional chess at all. I always say, I think it's more likely he's eating the chess pieces than he's playing four-dimensional chess, right? But he has this kind of like reptilian brain understanding of how to pick, in this attention economy, how to pick and suck Democrats into fights that are good for him. So like the best example in my opinion in these first 9 months of his presidency is the crime stuff. Like, the average person is like, well, I don't want big cities to be dangerous, and they are dangerous. So whatever we do to get cities more safe is great. Like, look, the idea that Trump says this all the time now, DC was the most unsafe city in the country, and now it's the safest. Patently false. Okay, like, it's just not true. Was it super safe? No, but was it like most other big cities where crime is a part of it? Yes. Is surging amounts of law enforcement in there a sustainable solution in the long term? No. Does it have, especially on the left, does it have worrisome implications about the military patrolling the streets? Yes. But my point is, the average person doesn't engage at that level at all. They're like, yeah, I want to feel safe when I go to the nation's capital, and he's doing it.
They also don't care as much about process, right? So it's like,
they're all about process.
Trump is trying to stop crime and stop illegal immigration. He's right directionally. Now, his execution of that could be like incompetent, corrupt, sort of uncompassionate, whatever. But a lot of people are just gonna be like, well, at least he's trying. I think more people adopt the at least he's trying mentality than we would like to believe.
A ton. I think the two things that have the reason that Trump is not at 35% in approval rating, he's in the kind of low to mid 40s, is because people don't agree with how he does stuff broadly, immigration, crime, whatever. But they like his diagnosis of the problem, and they like that he appears to be doing stuff. Like, even if they don't agree with the stuff he's doing, they're like, well, he's doing stuff. And again, some of that is about Biden and the perceived lack that he just didn't do much. So, I think in general, Trump has been good at luring Democrats. Look, Democrats are losing when they are having a debate about the acceptable level of crime in a big city. They just are. Like, or about like Trump deporting people who are here illegally. Broadly speaking, people agree with that. Do they like the process? To the extent that they're aware of it, no, but they're not aware of it, really. And so, I like that directionally they're with him. And I think kind of, again, even with the government shutdown, it's like, I think people in general think the federal government's too big and too bloated. Now, do you want Elon Musk and these 22-year-olds from Doge doing it? No,
Big balls.
like direct, yes.
But Chris, but here's where
you're probably right.
I totally agree with everything you've just said. And I think it's an argument for what Democrats are actually doing now is making it about healthcare. Like that might be,
yeah.
Again, I think it's a little bit awkward to say like, we think Donald Trump is an authoritarian dictator that we can't fund unless he extends Obamacare subsidies. But to your point, if picking something like the topic, whether it's crime, if being directionally right is the key, then this is maybe a smart move. And so even though I criticize Jeffries and Schumer for just being out of touch with the zeitgeist, but the thing about making this about ACA actually might not be a stupid idea.
I think anything that takes Democrats away from making it about Donald Trump, the person, as opposed to policies that Donald Trump supports, or about democracy, smart for Democrats. The thing, if I'm a Democrat, what I would worry about is stop talking about Donald Trump. Stop talking about the end of our democracy. I understand it kicks ass on Substack. I understand it kicks ass on podcasts. I understand it kicks ass on YouTube. Those people,
and also I think it's something that like a lot of people are legitimately concerned about too.
Absolutely.
Right?
But you know who those people tend to be? People who are never, ever, ever going to vote for a Republican. That's the problem. I'm not suggesting, look, this is just pure realpolitik here. I'm not getting into, the merits of that argument, which I think there are some. I mean, I have said many times over, I thought January 6th was disqualifying for Donald Trump, and yet here we are. My point is, the people who Democrats need are not the people who are already for them. They are not the people who are subscribers to the Midas Touch YouTube channel. They are people who don't follow this stuff super closely, are much more concerned about, like, why are grocery prices higher, and Donald Trump said they were going to be lower than they are right now. Talk about that. Like, I saw this poll in Axios that Axios commissioned this morning from Harris, where 47% of people say grocery prices are higher than they were a year ago. About beat that drum.
Yes.
To me, you talk about tariffs and prices are obviously connected, right? Tariffs, prices, and healthcare. Just beat that drum every single day. Don't talk about how Donald Trump's a despicable person. Like, you can believe that. It doesn't move persuadable voters. Stop talking about Donald Trump's assault on democracy. Again, you can believe that. It doesn't move persuadable voters. Talk about stuff that people care about. He was expressly elected to bring down the price of groceries.
Day one.
If that isn't happening, say, play the clip of Donald Trump saying, I'm going to bring down the prices on everything. And then say, this price is up. This price is up. This price. Just make that ad and run it relentlessly. I think
hard to do it. Hard to do that when he's got the Trump 2028 hats in your face at the Oval Office,
I know,
right?
But again, it's about are you going to get sucked into fights on unfavorable ground? Like, I think Democrats often make this mistake. This has been true always when I've covered them. They want to win the argument and win the battle, lose the war. Democrats should be focused on one thing and one thing only between now and next November: winning back the House. Because if you don't have control of one chamber of Congress or the White House, you can't really do much of anything. You can do what they're doing now, which is basically withhold votes. But ultimately, how much are you going to win there? You need a foothold in the actual Congress. And the House is a very credible foothold. Do the things that will win you power. Worry about winning, like being on the moral high ground, much less, and worry about winning the actual election much more. They oftentimes feel like, well, I mean, we're the better people, but you're out of power, and politics is about power. So you can be the better people all you want, And you've seen what full Republican control will do in Washington in the first 8 months. And we got a whole other year to go. And then 2 more years after that of Donald Trump being president. So it's like, I think you got to deal with the world as it is, not the world as you want it to be, if you're a Democrat.
Definitely. All right. Before I get you out of here, last premature, wildly premature speculation. Who wins the World Series? We just started the wild. We're in the wild cards, but who wins the World Series?
I still like the Dodgers, and look, as a Nationals fan, it's like, man, it would be nice if our team could just even make a playoff run, much less make the playoffs. But I think I'm biased because, like, I actually think Shohei Ohtani, for all the attention he gets, is still underrated. Like, so
he may be the greatest player in baseball.
The greatest baseball player in baseball history. I think he will be. I think his trajectory speaks to that. So I'm a little biased because I mostly just want to watch more Ohtani, and I hate/love Freddie Freeman so much. He seems like the greatest guy. He's
a good hang.
He's an incredible player. Incredible player. He hit basically like 850 against the Nationals when he was on the Braves for like every year. But I like him. I like Mookie Betts. I like Dave Roberts. So I kind of want to watch the Dodgers the most. I like watching the Padres too. I mean, Mason Miller throwing 104 on the black on the outside corner. He is pretty amazing, like throwing it like a BB. I like watching the Padres. I grew up a Yankee fan, Matt. I will admit I grew up in Connecticut. I was a Yankee fan. I don't really care that much about the Yankees anymore, other than like Judge. He seems like a likable. I'm like a personalities guy as opposed to like a team guy.
We're coming full circle.
I know,
about
right?
The personalities.
Yeah. So, do I care about the Guardians? Not really. Although my friend from college, his brother is the GM. My friend is Dave Antonetti, who's a physician in Connecticut. Chris Antonetti's his older brother. Shout out to Orange, Connecticut, and Chris Antonetti. So I have a little bit of a rooting interest there. But I think the Dodgers, for me, is what I just, as a fan of a big fan of baseball, as a middle-aged white guy, I'm like writing a demo to root for baseball. But as a fan of baseball whose team is not in this, I think the Dodgers still, until somebody beats them, I think the Dodgers. I know I kind of sleep on the Blue Jays. I just don't watch a lot of Blue Jays games. I know they won the AL East, but like I don't pay a ton of attention to them. I know people are like the Brewers, but I don't know. I root for the story, to be totally candid. Yeah. And like Yankees Dodgers would be a great story. I know it's like two overdogs, but it would be like,
wasn't that last year though? I mean,
yes, totally.
Yeah.
It's the rich get richer, but I like the Dodgers. I love Ohtani. I just think Ohtani is going to go down as we are witnessing. It's like watching Lionel Messi play soccer. You are watching the greatest soccer player ever to do it. I don't want to hear about Ronaldo. I don't want to hear about Diego Maradona. I understand all those things. Messi is the greatest soccer player of all time. As of today. Yeah. Maybe Lamine Yamal or somebody who's younger comes along and eclipses him. But when you are watching Ohtani, it's like being able to go in Austria to a concert that Mozart is giving. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should do that because there's one Mozart. When you're watching Ohtani, I think that's what you're watching. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer if he never picked up a ball to pitch it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just on hitting alone, but he is also a guy who throws 100 miles an hour. Like, how? Like, we just don't have that. So I'm going to continue to root for Ohtani inside of the story. So I guess the Dodgers, even though I know that makes me like to be like a real baseball nerd, I should probably pick like the Brewers, because like they're like small market teams.
I'm rooting Brewers. I'm betting Dodgers. So this is how you weasel out of it if you're if you want to be all things to all people.
Just please, can the learners spend some money or sell the team to the Leonses so that the Nationals can be relevant again? Because
as an Orioles fan,
I'm not getting younger. Oh, an Orioles fan. Oh boy.
I'm not going to sit here and let a guy whose team won the World Series 5 years ago,
Fair point.
Bigfoot me about what it's like
Fair point.
Okay.
Can you guys trade us Gunnar Henderson? Because I feel like you don't love, or Adley Rutschman. We will take
Adley,
either
maybe.
of those guys. I will take either of those guys.
I think Adley's going to be on the trade market, sadly. So
our catcher of the future, Keibert Ruiz, barely played this year, and when he did play, he hit about 210. So I know Rutschman is an up and down. I will take Rutschman.
You may get him. You may get him.
Okay.
Chris Cillizza, everybody. If you're not, if you're following me on Substack, but not Chris, correct that. And the opposite is true as well. Chris Cillizza, thanks for coming back, man.
Thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure. Take care. See you,
Thanks,
everybody. Be well.
See you guys.